call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized. And when you get on the show, you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we'll not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, talk that get results. You can also follow this program via our YouTube channel at Vaughn Radio. You click subscribe, and our Facebook page at Vaughn Radio. Thank you all again for joining us. This evening we got 3 segments of the program for you. The first segment, we'll be speaking with one of our illustrious sons of Nevis, but who resides in England, Mr. Arthur France, and he'll tell you, I'll let him do all the talking and tell you all about him. That's the first segment. The second segment, we'll be speaking to an acclaimed film producer, right? So maybe after tonight, at least one of us might become a star in the movie business, who knows? And then thirdly, the heavyweights are in. So that's our show for this evening. So here we go. Mr. Arthur France, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
And I gotta let you know, it's so good speaking with you. Most people, a lot of folks know about you, some don't. So why don't we begin this way? First of all, I want to thank you very much for staying up late and being a part of this show, especially for the Nevisians and the Kiddishans, not just here but all over the globe, and also in England where you are. Good evening again, Mr. France, and thank you for joining us this evening.
It's my pleasure, sir.
Okay, so why don't you tell us who you are? I'm going to just say, let the folks who don't know that you are from Nevis, and then you give us a quick bio, why you're not in Nevis now, but you live in England, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's do that.
Well, I was born in the little sleepy village, Mount Lily, Nevis. I went to Cumbermere School, immigrated to England, where I am still reside here in the city of Leeds. And the best thing that happened to me was to be born in Nevis of African descendants, which I am exceptionally very, very proud of and very sentimental over that. And I've always maintained that it's an honor and a privilege to hold the flag and carry the light of St. Kitts and Nevis, because as you know, everybody looked at us as from a small island. But what surprised most people is knowing where I'm from, and they could never believe that such a son could come out of Nevis. But I remain to them that Nevis was turned the royalty of the Caribbean, and we have a history that's second to none. As the great Malcolm X always said, if you don't know, I will tell you, and in case you forget, I will remind you that some great people came from those 2 little islands, and I'm very proud of that. Whenever I go, and make sure that we give Nevis the credit is deserved.
Mr. France, I'm going to test you. You said you came from the sleepy village of Mount Lily. Provide me some evidence to prove that. Meaning, for instance, tell of us somebody that you know in Mount Lily, maybe your family.
Spoon is my cousin. You should know Spoon and Althea Jones.
Mm-hmm.
They in Mount Lily. And my sister still lives here, Janet Herbert.
Mm-hmm.
She lives at the bottom part of Mount Lily.
Okay, that's enough evidence for me.
Right.
And I'm sure Auntie Janet is very proud of hearing you right now. I know she is listening. She normally listens to this show. Okay, so you went into England from Mount Lily. A lot of folks did that at that time, correct?
Yes, quite right, quite right.
And
That's
mainly,
quite interesting at that time.
yes, and mainly to make a better living.
Well, I never talking about a better living. I mean, because I had a very good life in Nevis. I mean, it made people feel like what we have wasn't good enough. And I maintain that, my days growing up I've got fond memories of growing up in that beautiful island of Nevis that I cherish most, and making sure that my children, my wife and my children, they come down there and they see themselves as the vision.
Okay, so you've been in England, and you tell us about some of the stuff that you have done while you are there.
Well, one thing that when I came to England, we find that it didn't take me long to find my feet. England was, apart from physically cold, the people was cold, very racist. The problem is that we were here in England, and we decided, well, we're going to give it a good go. And at a very early age, they realized they had a very racist and fair system in England. And in fact, we were young, and some of the families in England had children. And we picked up on the very early that the education in England was not up to the standard that we expected. And the black children were not getting what the best out of the system. And we took this, we set up, the first thing we did was to set up an organization, because when we had the Federation of the Caribbean, I was very much happy about it. And you might have heard of Joseph N. France. My uncle was in the trade union and the Labour Party in Saints. And he was my political and cultural mentor. And so I cherished the Federation of the Caribbean, but which it didn't last long. And I used to spend a lot of time with another brother-in-law of mine, whose name was George Archibald. He was from Charleston, prior to my sister Elaine. And we spent most of our time talking together. And I've always felt we need to have an organization that represents us. And looking at the model of what the Federation of the Caribbean was. Funny, I was living in a one-bed, six flat in Grange Avenue in Chapeltown with one chair and a bed. And we talk all the time, and I said, we need to set this organization up. And we're going to name it the United Caribbean Association. And the last Sunday in November 1964, invited 27 people into my bedsit and make a suggestion that we say we need to set this organization up and call it the United Caribbean Association, and all the people will be founder bodies. But one of the things I didn't understand, that most of us wasn't politically and culturally aware, had the courage to do what needed to be done. So we used to go to the school meetings, where parents meeting they have maybe every term in the school. And we found, and go out to homes and visit the children, and we find the children wasn't doing very well. And find out the system was a racist system. And the parents, when the parents complained, they just ignore them. We had a chief education officer for the city who had a lot of power, named R.S. Johnson. And he was very disrespectful to these black parents. So we decided we signed for this nonsense. And they had a school in Chapeltown, Copper Street School, where most of these little black children went. And we find there was a lot of things wrong about it, and the guy not over racist anyway. And we challenged him. And we decided if they're not going to do anything about it, we're going to shut down the school for a day, take the kids out of school, and do something with them for the day.
Okay, so, and just a minute. So, and that was in your early years in England?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you quickly became, would you say, at what people would call an activist and fighting for the rights of black people?
Very active, yeah. Very active and radical.
And very active. And what did you get a lot of pushback for it?
Yeah, well, a lot of the parents, they used to upset when we come to the meeting for the youth, but they don't need material and they come in here to upset the thing because they believe whatever the white man said was right. And I'm telling them that we were far in front of the white man. They're standing in front of nonsense. So we when we did, they had a Church of God church in Chapel Down. And so we more or less hijacked the church, went to the school, take the children out of the school, tell them there for the day, and tell the authorities they coming back until you get the head of this racist headmaster. I did get the head of the headmaster and change things up.
So you did get results for your action?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And a lot of results out of it from education.
Well, you're on the right show too. So we do things that get results. So okay,
yeah.
and right, we so let's go on now to another area which you were renowned for as well. You helped organize celebrations, Carnival.
Well, I was the one who actually I felt we need an event that brings us together in harmony. You didn't need an invite. You need, because we had wedding, you had christening, and you have to need an invitation. You want an event that will bring everybody together. So I went to a meeting, a city meeting, council meeting once, and suggested that we should have a carnival in England. And they said, oh, that'd be a nice idea. We could have a nice big Irish band. I said, no, hold on a minute. You're going to fast talking about the West Indian Carnival because I know we'll be swamped and taking over. But I knew the politics and understand what's going on. And you know, they couldn't stop you from they have to have a good reason to prevent you from using the streets. So I know we have to get the permission from the council to use the park and the permission from the police to use the road because the police have to control the streets. So I went around and suggested to some of my friends that we should have a carnival in England. And so people, the news going around and people thought I was crazy. You know, this man is mad. I want to bring us here to look like fool for the white man. But what I didn't know, I already went and got the permission from the council for the park, and I got the permission from the police for the carnival. But going around, cannot get people to support me. In fact, you wouldn't believe, set up the United Cabinet Association, I set that up, and we went to a meeting with the idea, and let some of the meeting thought I was crazy. So I'm not one to take no for an answer. So I went around, canvassed the members there. Went back to another meeting. They half-heartedly said, okay, we pick a team to work with you. That's a right, that's a Sunday. I said, we meet with it. Oh?
Yes.
So I said, we'll meet on a Tuesday and explain to them the task they need to do. And I want them to come back the next Tuesday with some results. They came back with no results. And I sacked them. I tell them I don't want to see them again. So they pick another group, same thing happened. So then we had the West Indian students in Leeds, which I became chairman of the Leeds West Indian students. And we used to have we never had much going, so we used to meet at people's house on a Friday and Saturday night, you know, for a little party. That's all we had. And then all of that is abused. And in fact, funny enough, my sister named Elaine Archibald, who was married to George, And one Sunday, we sat in the sitting room, went to visit my sister. And this lady came in here from Nevis, and she didn't know who I was. And she didn't know that Elaine was my sister. And this is what she said when she walked in. Yeah. I hear they got a crazy man here from Nevis, want to bring us here to make us look like fool for the white man. Anyway, I hope the police will lock them up, rain will come and drown them. So I laughing to myself, but she did not laugh at me sat there. And now my sister she talking to. So Elaine look at me and both of us smile, you know, and I ain't bother with her anyway. And so this thing going on, and people say, yeah, I got some stuff printed, and nobody taking me on, and some of the students, them, especially those from Trinidad, we used to meet in one of the houses of the other side of Chapeltown, as usual on a Saturday night. So we were there as usual having our fun this Saturday night, and I brought up the idea of a carnival again. And somebody said, oh, Lord, the crazy ass, don't worry. And then they start making fun of me. But then one of my mates who was living on the other side of Leeds, and by the time we finished 1 o'clock the Sunday morning of the party, I was driving him home to where he lived. And he says to me, don't take no notice of them, I will give you a hand. I said, right, your name is Willie Robertson. You were doing medicine. So once Willie said, yes, I will give you a hand, I thought, boy, this is going to happen. So that was a Sunday morning early, we're going home. I said, right, we'll meet on Tuesday, 7 o'clock, at number 3 Copper Street, where we had our headquarters for the organization. So Willie Robertson, he had a cousin named Ken Thomas, Calvin Beach from Sinkit, another one of my brother-in-law, and a guy from Sinkit named Vanterpool, and a lady from Nevis, Mrs. Gordon, who was a seamstress, to decide how we're going to sort this thing out. And did when we started, and you wouldn't believe, and people still having a laugh at us, and they didn't realize how serious we were. Now, none of us ever put on any event of that magnitude. So we had to, I wanted to have the last lap dance at Town Hall in Leeds. But that cost quite a bit of money. Nobody had any money. But George Archibald, my brother-in-law, we took our money and paid for the hall. And then we decided we got to design and manufacture these costumes. None of us never made anything. We wanted steel bands. And a cousin from St. Kitts, Scotland, I think his son worked for Nevis, born in England. He had the electrician working for the government in Nevis. And both of us were very passionate about the steel band, so we started making steel band as well. And it is lots of fun. And so we used to get these oil drum, make these steel band down in the cellar. And so we made the first steel band called Day Carnival. And so we decided we're making 5 queen costumes, a sun goddess, a gondola, Snow Queen, Cleopatra, and a gondola. And we make 5 queen costumes. And nobody believed it was going to happen, it could have happened. They decided we got to get a calypso competition as well. So we went through and looking at the young guys, and I said to these young guys, never sing before, and train him to sing, and put all of this, and making the steel and making costumes and putting everything together. And we believe it or not, because remember he left yesterday, so the news went round, we having a carnival, but people still think this is a joke. And we brought out, we made 3 troops, a Red Indian, the Ashanti tribe, the the Britannia troop, Fantasia Britannia, and some sailors and a children group. And all of them we done together. And believe it or not, at the Queen show, the night and the Calypso show, people turned up to laugh at us because they couldn't believe it was going to happen. So then we wanted a little bit of a push. So we heard they had a black man who used to, first black man who was a reporter on television in England. A guy from Trinidad named Clive Allen, before Trevor McDonald. So we heard he was working for Times Television. And we phoned up the television station, and funny enough, we got him straight away and explained to him what we want to do, what we're doing. And he was so happy to hear us. I said, yeah man, yes, I will be there, I'll be there. So Clive turned up to empty the show. The first black matron they ever had in England was a lady named Matron Steele from Guyana. Was a matron of a hospital in Yorkshire. And she and I get on to invite her as well, to, you know what I mean, to build us to look a bit prestigious. And they turn up. And believe it or not, the Saturday night of the show, lots of people turn up, but they turn up to laugh at us. And they had a shock of their life to see the show. And the show went extremely well.
And all this time you're doing all that, and you know people want to make a clown out of you, but you persevered.
Well, I'm very determined. And the more you push me back, the more I push you down.
Oh, okay.
I'm on the vision, you know.
Yeah, okay.
I'm on the vision.
Okay, so there you go.
So,
and if we can jump forward a little bit, and so that is the beginnings of what today is accepted as this great carnival, correct?
Yeah, that's swept all over Europe.
Right. Now I want to.
Place of Western carnival in Europe, free from Nevis.
Right. Now I want to as I said, go forward a bit, because we are going to not tonight, but some other time I'm going to have you real in depth so we can get into a lot of details. But some years ago there were as a cultural team from Nevis that went to England, and you were instrumental in that as well, correct?
It's our 50th anniversary.
Right.
When Vance came with Freedom and Sheila. Yeah.
Okay.
That was great. That was great.
That was great. And so
yeah.
The other area that I want to touch on is the exhibit that the Great House that they spoke about with you the other day. So tell us about that.
Haywood House. Well,
yes.
Haywood, this great prestigious house, more prestigious house in Yorkshire, which is the Queen family them, Haywood House. And however, one of the son and I became very close to each other. And when the Queen celebrated her 50th golden jubilee, when she came to Yorkshire, she had to go up to that house because of the family. So when the Queen came, they wanted a steel pan and some carnival costume on display. So we feature 6 big Queen costumes on that day. The Queen and the Duke were there, and it was interesting for the Duke look a bit miserable, and the Queen sat there, and you believe it or not, the sun came out, and when those costumes turned up in front of the Great House, you should have seen the smile on the Queen and the Duke face. That the Duke and the Queen came between those costumes, and they were so at home that she with them, they're laughing and taking pictures with them.
So the joke wasn't miserable no more.
Yeah, no. And the Queen, I could sit over, I'm sitting in the front room here, and I'm looking at a picture of my wife and the Queen together.
Mm.
And funny, they had a dinner in the great house for the Queen. And my wife and myself were the only two black people at the dinner. And I remember when he walked through the door, the Lord Haywood, the Earl of Haywood, who was welcome us there, and he says to me, I make sure I put you to sit down to the table next to the Queen, you know. And so we had a good laugh. I said, we built a relation, and they realized I've got a very serious side to me, because education is one of my passion at taking on the establishment. So they normally have regular big events at the house, and they sometimes invite me up as a speaker, because I like to speak, I like to talk, and I like to, you know what I mean, my book tell you what type of person I am. I like to take on the establishment. And so the younger family now work out that we've got to change up the system, because all you've got in there is pictures and information of white upper class people who had our forefathers enslaved. So they decided we need to change the system up, and because them and I got along, and they realized I am quite a serious side, and they use me. They want to do a feature on me, and they spend some time, cost a lot of money, to do a portrait of me and put up some. They took over 3 rooms up in the big house, and so they transport my whole sitting room. All it came down and look at all the pictures and all the stuff that I got here, and copy them. So a whole room is dedicated to my sitting room up there. Another room is dedicated to. Now I love to design and manufacture carnival costumes, and my costumes them must be historical, and they must have a link with Africa and the Caribbean. So when we celebrate the 50 years of carnival, when the group came up from Nevis, wow, that was a beautiful night to have them there. So a costume that I designed, which is from the Ashanti tribe from Ghana that went to the Caribbean and Nani and lead the revolution in the Caribbean. So that costume represents that time. So that costume is in another room with a steel pan. And then another room having the portrait of myself. So, you know, I mean, as I said, we were down there 2 or 3 years ago, and one of my granddaughter who plays the steel pan, and you know, so they have all of them. So the whole place is dedicated, and there are many events. And last Thursday they had an event up there with me as well. Some people came from around the country, and a panel of speakers pertaining to my work that is in Haywood House.
Okay, that's the Haywood House, and you said that is in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
And that's a place that people normally visit.
Oh yeah, there is a lot of visitors, and they have some very prestigious thing that people pay lots of money to go in to see.
Okay, all right, very well. So, Mr. Franz, we want to thank you very much. As I promised, that on this program, Let's Talk, going forward, and once you agree, we can talk a little bit more about you and the stuff that you did and the visions in England and all that. Is that okay?
I am very, very happy, and thank you very, very much, because I am a son of Nevis, and I'm committed to most everything that I can do for Nevis. I'm very, very happy for that.
And also, I want to also let them know the village that you're from too. Again.
Yes, Mount Lily, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. We have a fellow named Edric. When he comes on, I'll let him know that you were from Mount Lily.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mr. Franz.
Yes. Tuvia used to work on one radio, didn't she?
Yeah, she still work with me personally, though.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
She's my cousin. She come up here regular. She take part in Carnival in Leeds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she take part in the show, help me costume and sometimes and help to host the show.
Oh, that is good. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks again, and we congratulate you for all the work that you have done. And one of the things that I've learned this evening from you is that when people think that you will get thrown out, you are well organized. You have permission already. I remember that part.
Well, if I tell you what to learn, when you're going to take on your enemy, you better learn the history.
Yes.
You got to learn politics, art, culture, and race.
Right. Okay. All right, Mr. Franz, thank you again.
It was a great pleasure, my pleasure. And give the people of Nevis my love and tell them they are very close to my heart.
Okay. Thanks. Have a good evening.
And thank you very much, and all the best.
Mr. Arthur Franz, MBE. We're back with our second segment right after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Back in this episode of Talk That Get Results with our second segment, and interestingly enough, we're staying with the arts and culture. We just talked with Mr. Franz of Nevis, living in England, and we heard his exploits in that arena. The next person we're going to be speaking with, you'll find out, maybe a different part of the globe, but in the same arena. Is it Ayara? How do I pronounce your name?
Yada
Lee.
Yada is a Brazilian name. It means mother of water. I was born and raised in Brazil, but my parents are Korean. And I am a world activist. I'm doing a lot of work in different parts of the African continent, Middle East, Latin America. And it's a great honor to be here, Everett and Conrad and Edric.
Lee. And you said you're a Brazilian activist?
Yes.
And you're Brazilian?
Yes. So I
could have guessed that based on, and what do you call your headpiece?
Oh, this?
Yes. It looks Brazilian.
Yeah, actually it's more African.
Oh, it's African.
I have an African heart.
Oh, okay, so there you go.
With Korean eyes, Brazilian soul.
You have Korean eyes?
Yes.
And African hat?
Yes.
And what else?
Well, and here I am in your precious island, trying to bring some of our films. Cultures of Resistance is our organization. We basically promote a resistance movement through arts and culture, through music, dance, photography, poetry, whatever it takes to promote positive change through creativity. So
And why do you think you got involved in that?
I come from the arts and culture world, but as I observe the world and all the problems we have, I realize we have to use arts and culture to go beyond arts and culture. So I think it's the greatest tool we have, because we are not going to use weapons or, terrorism like governments do with us. We're going to use creativity to combat all the negative forces, the tsunami of problems that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And I'm trying to promote hope, because we cannot just pray or cry or get desperate. We have to move forward and get action on the ground and get the youth to come on board to salvage the world.
You see, that is fascinating, because you made a comparison, and people have to realize and appreciate there are a lot of ways you can make your case, right?
Yes, but mainly action,
Yes.
because sometimes people are informed, sometimes people know what's going on, but that's not enough. Or sometimes people, sometimes I show my movies and they're like, oh, I'm so inspired. I'm like, okay, but we got to transform this inspiration into action, because we have a lot of work ahead of us. And that's why the film I'm bringing to the island is called From Trash to Treasure, How to Turn Negatives into Positives, which is a philosophy that I embrace and I want more people to embrace, because hope is the only answer.
So from trash to treasure, it's a great title and catchy as well. Can you give us a synopsis of it?
I went to this tiny country called Lesotho in southern Africa, and I was curious because, I've been traveling the world. I've been to 178 countries, and when I saw Lesotho, I was like, okay, I haven't been here. Let's go and see what's going on there. And it's a country with so many problems: corruption and HIV and child marriage and, problems with the LGBTI that are persecuted, and nepotism, and whatever you can think of, unemployment, everything you can think of, they got there. But they are not going to sit around. They're going to use recycling, they're going to use environmental justice, they're going to use hip-hop music, they're going to use cycling to get the kids out of trouble. Instead of, doing drugs, they're cycling, and, they're doing sports. People are making films to educate people about child marriage, that is not correct to marry children underage. And so people are just like engaged, in using arts and culture to change their society. And I thought it was so wow, amazing. And a lot of times people bring negative stories from the African continent, and I'm determined to bring the positive stories because they have so much to teach us, So this is something that a lot of times goes unperceived by mainstream media. And as I'm an independent filmmaker, I try to bring those out of the radar stories to motivate people to keep fighting for positive change.
So would you say what you present to people is important because it can have them shaped one way or the other?
Yeah, because it's so overwhelming when you look at the news and the state of the world and the whole situation, all these criminal wars and state terrorism, so all these things are so overwhelming. Sometimes people just freeze, and we cannot afford to freeze. We have to actually just get motivated, and the more problems we see, the more we have to be, on the ground doing things to change. And especially young people, because they will inherit this world, so at this point I'm not even thinking of change immediate. I'm thinking about planting seeds of love and hope and solidarity, so people maybe few generations down the road can see the trees grow, But unfortunately, the speed of destruction is so fast that we cannot afford to be too slow with our salvaging the world, So people really have to get on the program and get going.
So you've been to West Africa, you've been to a lot of different areas. But this is just one tiny place. How did you get here? How did you learn about here and get here?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm very interested in off the beaten path places that are not cliche, like I was telling this morning I did another interview that most filmmakers, they just want to show in London, Paris, New York, Tokyo, and to me it's very important to acknowledge there's more than that, So each of my small films, they screen in at least 100 countries, and all very grassroots style. It's just me and my assistants knocking at the door. Tuck, 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 we have this movie, can we show it? So it's not through like distributor or, sales agent. It's all grassroots and people connecting with people. And, I was doing an agroecology course in Puerto Rico, learning about ecological agriculture, and I said, okay, since I'm here, let's do a tour of the Caribbean. So we just screened in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, we had a screening in Guadeloupe, we had a screening in San Lucia, we had a screening in Puerto Rico, we had a screening in many different places here. And a lot of times people say, oh, it's just cruise ships. I'm like, no, there is community, there are people living here that need to cherish and protect their land. It's not just about cruise ships and tourists, and in fact we have to get the people who live here to educate these tourists so you can have these beautiful, amazing neves and St. Kitts, preserved for the future generations.
And I gather also, as you do some documentaries, did you do one in Chernobyl?
Yeah, I did one in Chernobyl as well. We are screening that in other places. That was before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, and that was about energy, because people think about nuclear energy as clean because it's not carbon, but at the end it's like, what do you do with the nuclear waste, But the film has a very adventure facade because, as bizarre as it is, Chernobyl became the #1 destination in Ukraine for tourists. People here come for the beach. People go to Chernobyl for post-apocalypse tourists because people got bored of the beach. So humans are strange, and so I made a film about this phenomenon. But then obviously things have changed drastically with the invasion of Ukraine, this beautiful country that is now destroyed, and we are trying to send a lot of humanitarian aid and support. So a lot of my films, they start as kind of like avant-garde and very like, anticipating some of these things, but then they become historical when the time goes by. So it's a very interesting phenomenon because Chernobyl now is very much up for grabs again with the Russian occupation and invasion and war and all these things. But here I thought maybe it would be more suitable to bring From Trash to Treasure, which is a film I shot in Southern Africa. And then I also have, after the intermission, we also have another film called One Talks, Dance of Resilience in Melanesia, because I think you will find a lot of similarities because in the Pacific we have all these island countries. And this year, for the first time, it's becoming official that we are going to have the first country disappear. Tuvalu is a country that will be completely submerged, so people are evacuating and they are just accepting that this is going to disappear as a country. So I think you, as an island country too, or twin island country, will also feel connected to this story of climate injustice, because a lot of these countries, they are very pristine, ecological, they don't even have factories, but they are the first to get the sea rise and all the effects of climate change, that is provoked mainly by industrialized countries that overconsume and abuse, and create all these catastrophes that are paid by people who are completely innocent all the way down in the Pacific Islands.
For the time, and I know you have not been here very long, but for the time that you've been on our islands, and of late we have been used for doing some filming by some of the filming companies and stuff like that. What is your opinion? What do you gather of the islands?
I'm so amazed because, it's still pristine and it's still like so real. A lot of the Caribbean countries have been destroyed by tourists, massive tourists or cruise ships. But here, you still have lots of spots that are really like, wow, it's almost like so untouched by these resorts and all this crazy, like, all in one place. So I'm so like begging you, please keep protecting your island.
You think maybe one of these days you might do a documentary of here as well?
Well, I'm connecting to the local documentary people to see what they are up to, and I actually have heard already some very interesting stories. One of the filmmaker, Cleon, he's from St. Kitts, he's interested in bringing the stories of the forgotten heroes of St. Kitts and Nevis, because you have all these resistance heroes that don't get acknowledged in history books, because history books are written by the winners, by colonial powers. So unfortunately, I have to say a lot of things we learn in the history books are lies because they are written by colonial powers. So history has to be rewritten, not only here but all over. And one of the filmmakers here wants to bring the story of resistance heroes from your islands, and I think it's a beautiful thing,
Yes, well, I have a way that I normally say. Some people write history the way they would like it to be read.
Exactly, and the powerful controls the media and history and everything. So in the U.S. there is even a book that is called The History from People's Perspective, and it's a history, from oppressed people, from the point of view of oppressed people, and not from the oppressor's point of view. Mm-hmm. It's quite different history book.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to allow Mr. Edric W. Stanley or Mr. Leiber to ask you a little question as we are leaving now, but I wanted to again tell us what's happening with the film. When is the showing?
It's going to be Sunday at NEPAC at 4 p.m. and it's open to everybody, free entry, and it will be just wonderful to be able to meet local people and talk about collaborating further, because as I was saying to Deslin, she runs NEPAC, I hope this is just the first of our collaborations, because this theater is amazing. This performing arts center is just amazing what you got here. So since we do films and we work with musicians and activists, and hopefully we'll do more. So come Sunday for the first introduction, and look forward to meeting you all Sunday, February 12, 4 p.m. The films are shorter than or feature-length films, and I guarantee you'll be, excited. It's not the typical boring documentaries, Has a lot of music, it's very active, it's very motivating and very encouraging, so young people come over too.
Okay, we thank you for coming to Nevis, and we appreciate you, and don't forget that documentary. Now, Mr. Edric, you got anything you'd like to ask her?
I would like to ask her, based on the election in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro and Lula da Silva, which side were you on?
For sure, I'm with the people. I'm with Lula.
Okay.
Okay. Naya, you got a question you want to ask?
Because it's all about supporting the people, the peasants and the people, the poor, because a lot of these politicians sometimes they just care about capitalism and the ones that are already rich and in power, and so we have to do, no politician is perfect, no politician is a saint, but we always have to choose the ones that will acknowledge and care about the ones that are destitute. Yeah, and hopefully Lula will take care of the poor people, because we have a very big problem of a difference, like the whole 1% super rich and 99 destitute. This is one of the issues, and we have a lot of urban violence, and we have a lot of exclusion, so we need to acknowledge indigenous people, and we need to care about the environment. Unfortunately, our previous president just didn't care. It was all about just capitalism, so hopefully we'll go back to a little bit more humanitarian, humanistic, and human government.
Naya, your question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the lady, are you a part of an organization? I didn't get
Yeah, it's called Cultures of Resistance.
Cultures of Resistance.
Yes, with the plural cultures, because at the end, it's about the women, the children, education, human rights, ecology. It's about intertwining everything. So we try to use creativity through, as a way of empowering and promoting and supporting and collaborating. And has been
and that organization is based where, or is it something global?
The work we do is mainly global south. So we do a lot of work in Somalia, Afghanistan, Kashmir, Palestine, Iraq, and conflict areas mainly. And but it's registered in the U.S. But we mainly do work in the global south, which means African continent, Middle East, and Latin America. So forth.
So what's the average length of one of your films?
My films, they go from short films all the way to full-length films.
Like when we come on Sunday.
Oh, this Sunday? Yeah, it's like less than half an hour, the first, and the second also 20 minutes. So the program total is like 1 hour, but then we'll have conversation and working and discussion, because I'm here to learn also what can we do together, to preserve your beautiful island, because it's just so precious. And what's happening here on the level of culture and art and engagement, because I think we just got email from the Taiwanese that they want to promote more recycling, so we'll have them come and participate and try to engage more people to promote the idea of recycling, because garbage is always a very big issue, because they're like, you are in an island, what do you do with the garbage produced, So, and I'm so curious to learn what are the youth, or what are the young people doing here to, do something that is positive for your country, and finding ways of collaborating.
Do you sometimes think that you would probably get in trouble with the authorities?
Oh yeah, I get thrown in jail, I get deported, I get visa canceled, because I'm mainly confronting the powerful governments. I confront the U.S. government because they like to promote the idea they're promoting democracy, and and then they go to Iraq and they invade Iraq, and I'm like, no, this is not promoting democracy. You want the oil, it's blood for oil, so I have to be very direct. And because sometimes governments don't appreciate, the Palestinian-Israel conflict, where we have this very long occupation of Palestine by Israel. So this is a very thorny issue that I also support. The Kashmiris are occupied by India and Pakistan. So there are a lot of very difficult issues, especially when it comes to war. Like I just think these wars are criminal. It's all about weapons industry. And we have to stop this carnage, Why do we have all these wars? It's just to sell weapons. We cannot allow this. It's so sad that these people are paying with their lives. So we have to work for peace with justice.
Okay. So we thank you once again. We will see you on Sunday.
Yes.
And if you're ever around this area again, please come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's the second segment of the program. We'll be back with our third and final segment right after this.
With all the from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
That appointment on Sunday at NIPAC. They've got 2 films that last about an hour, but then they'll be having conversations and discussions. Thank you for the second segment of the program, and the third and final segment of the program for this evening. We spoke with 2 activists. Mr. Arthur Ferns, he is in England, but he's from Nevis. We spoke with him earlier. And Dara Lee is from Brazil, a Brazilian descent, but she's been all over the globe. And might I say our local activist, Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo.
Are you an activist?
No.
You're not an activist. So, Conrad Naya, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo.
Are you an activist?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we dealing with a lot of activists tonight. Gentlemen, we can talk a little bit more on the two segments going. I personally thought pretty refreshing and interesting, right?
Yeah, it was.
But before we do that, though, a man is as good as his word. I want to begin this third segment with a light moment with your permission, right? But before I do that, Edric, a police officer asked me today to ask you a question. And I wouldn't say threatened, but for want of a better word, he threatened me if I didn't do it. You know what he will do. He will lock me up. Okay? So he asked me to ask you, how is the country running? So I promise I'll do that. Whether you answer or not, I have asked you. Okay? Now.
You need the answer?
Yeah, well, little later on.
Okay.
But I'm going to begin with a light moment. Right? Now, last week, you gave me a little story before we got on the air. You told me it might have been a fellow who said to you, your horse will come home.
That is correct.
Okay, so can you recite that for me? What happened there?
Well, my horse did come home, and as a result, I have been accosted by so many people with the same phrase, and I'm not 100% certain. Of course, I think they watched and gathered that was the phrase that I stated when my horse arrived, when my horse came home. And this is a term that I got from being a jockey, and as a result, that was a familiar term that I used. My horse will come home. Now, seemingly, I am getting some backlash from that, simply because my horse came home, and Dr. Brantley was the victor, and Pat was vanquished by Dr. Brantley. As a result, it looks like people are attempting to take it out on me. I wasn't a candidate in the race, but at the same time, knowing what has transpired and the history of Dr. Brantley's team, which he has led quite magnificently, they have done a remarkable job for the island of Nevis, the people of Nevis, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and ultimately for his party. So, based on what I've gathered, I stated my horse will come home, and he did come home, to the amazement of the other two panelists, simply because they were expecting a different result.
Okay, well, you can get into all that afterwards, but I just wanted to said what you were telling me, and then somebody and work with me, and then somebody said my horse will come in, and you had to correct them.
I don't
because there's a difference.
Right, quite a fundamental difference. may I just say I asked somebody to print because I was at the airport and a lady walked up to me and said, "My horse will come home." And as she walked away and turned right back, she said, "Maybe I should go to this particular place and get a t-shirt printed. My horse will come home." I said, "It's not a bad idea, it's a brilliant idea." I went to this place and asked them to print, and they stuck in there a statement, "My horse will come home in." In is at the end. It doesn't make sense. Stick with what I told you. They had it written down, and I do not understand how they could have made such a colossal blunder.
So the persons who are repeating that phrase needs to understand that they must say it correctly.
Right.
Because there's a difference.
Quite a difference.
Not "my horse will come in." My
No.
horse
Will come home.
Okay. Now, so here's the right moment I have for you. A fellow, because everywhere you turn, you're correct. This, "my horse will come home," and then this other thing, I just can't get it. As a matter of fact, everybody wants to know, where were you? So see what happens. Fellow meets me. I met a fellow the other day, and we greeted him. And I said to him, "Man, you look like a heavyweight sitting down there." He says, "No, man, Edric is the heavyweight." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, man." And then he says, "It's my cousin, you know. So you should know what I'm talking about when I give the information," because he says both of your cousins. But then he says that you said that your horse will come home. But he keeps telling you that you must take your horse out of the race. I said, "Well, why would he do that?" Then he said to me, "Listen, Edric is my cousin, and when Edric ran in Gingerland, I was with Edric." I said, "Oh, really? So you were on the boat?" He said, "Always." I said, "Walk with me. You were on the boat when you throw Edric overboard?" He said no. But then he already said he was always on the boat, which translates into he was on the boat when they throw you overboard, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So he is suggesting to me that I should tell you that your horse is wounded, so take it out of the race.
Well,
Walk with me. So here's what some information I'll give you to put on your desk. If you're playing cricket, Edric, and you got a batsman who normally make a double century, and you normally give the opponent 2-1 innings defeat, and then you go and you play again, and your star batsman is injured, he only makes a century, but you're still winning, will you take out the batsman because he's injured?
no way.
Okay. Now, you remember there was a fellow who was a bright fellow in class, and two of the fellows who were not so bright beseeched him one day, "Let us not go to school. Let us rather go up the gut to look mangoes." And that fellow went with them. You see any connectivity there?
I see the connection, but at
Okay.
the same time,
Well, I'll say no more. I'll leave it to you now.
well, let me just for clarification and for edification and for education. The next day, I caught my senses. I was only around maybe 7 years old. At that time, we are influenced not only by elders, but also by our peers. And we were late to go to school that morning.
Oh, so you mean the fellow was you?
No, I was one of the fellows who went up the cut.
The bright one?
Quite so.
Okay, go ahead.
And based on our being late, they suggested, Mr. Kelly, we usually say, a bang, you know what that means? Licks. So
The point is that they con you. And you went with them.
I went with them,
Okay,
but I
so-
caught myself.
You caught yourself. So I'm asking you, now this cousin that you have, he's now telling you take out your horse out the race because your horse is injured. But you're winning.
He can't convince me.
Oh, okay. Because you already learned your lesson from those two fellas.
Quite so.
Oh, okay.
But at the same time, he mentioned my horse is wounded. And I said, even though my horse is wounded based on your barometer, he or my horse came home and we will put him back on the track again.
Okay, so the fact that he's your cousin, he's not gonna get you
Gone.
like those two fellas. Okay, I just checking. So the story is true then,
Quite so.
and the fella is your cousin,
Quite so.
but he must understand that he did not fool you.
No.
Okay.
And at the same time, it was a wake-up call. They're not going to come that close again. We must go back to the drawing board, plan,
Oh,
and
okay.
come back vehemently.
The light moment is finished, Edric. So now we can go on to other stuff that you and Naya want to go on to.
Well, before we end, based on what occurred, I'm getting a backlash, and people are taking up my real estate signs. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I suspect who the person is. As a result, I am saying to the police, those signs cost me $300 and more. They are my property. Anybody who takes somebody else's property over $100 or $200, the case might be, it is a crime. When we see and what we see, we must begin to speak.
Yeah, okay. No, that's not nice at all, and that's the thing why, you know, I said sometimes we've got to make light moments out of certain things so that people understand. But it's foolishness, right? I don't condone at all, right? And you know, the people who inspire these people to do these things must come openly and condemn it as well.
You see something, say something.
Yeah. Okay. So, we're hoping, Edric, that this continues. You said you have an idea of who it is. You get it to the authorities, and you know, with the person, the lady we had on a little while ago, and also the gentleman who was speaking about getting things done. Sometimes people come as bullies, and sometimes you got to push back.
You have to always.
Yeah, because when you want results in anything, and I believe everybody knows this quotation, you got to stand for something or you fall for anything.
Quite.
So you're going to get pushback and you're going to get discouraged. But most of some of these folks are bullies and cowards. Okay, so Naya, what we got?
Well, interesting two individuals we had on earlier. Mr. Franz of Nevis, well known in his work, and this is the first time I'm listening to him speaking of his efforts and his successes. trying to establish himself and the whole idea of carnival in England. Well, I think his work has turned out to be a great success because Leeds Carnival is huge, and carnival across England is large, and I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure, but I know Leeds Carnival in England is quite maybe one of the older ones. And when he was talking, I reflect upon, I always go to carnival in London when I'm in London, and one of the things really captivated me once was a large steel band, large, with just ladies, and it was like 80% of them was white, and they were going on so bad. They were going on like, Trinidadians, man, and so when he was talking, I reflected on that and thinking how wide his efforts and his work have spread, not just in Chapeltown, Leeds, but throughout England and possibly throughout Europe. You must admire him because, as he say, he likes to challenge the authorities, and of course, to establish something like carnival in England, he probably had to go through a lot of red tapes and so forth, and be very persistent. And I think that part of him we should all admire and realize that nothing happens until you decide to be very persistent and committed to what you're on about. He's a great division. He's well known, and I wish him long life because, as I say, he have really done something as he have expressed. He was a person who admired the Caribbean Federation. So he's a black man to the heart. I can feel him. He made costumes reflecting African culture, the Caribbean. I like the way he speaks of Nevis, even though he spent most of his life over there in England, and so we must respect, we must honor his work. The second lady also speak of challenging the authorities. She's an activist, and I consider myself to be an activist to most of the things she's talking about. I'm very, very, very much concerned about that. It's just the other day I was looking at some documentaries of Palestine, and they were actually coming out with theater work, reflecting their struggles and so forth. And they have seen great success in that too, in different areas of the Middle East too. It seems as if when you cannot speak, you can act and you can communicate in that way. And when I think of that concept here locally, I ask myself, well, I wonder if they're going to discriminate against you if you send a message through your artwork, maybe through theater work. I wonder if they would discriminate against you like they do, like when you come on here and express your opinion and so forth. Yes, we have a beautiful place down there, and I'm surprised, and I always talk about it. We always talk about value for money. That cost the taxpayers somewhere about $18 million. In fact, the money was a loan from the Labour government to the island administration. And I understand was passport money too. That's when they were treating us really bad. They continue still, but back then that was a loan, and I always ask are we getting value for money, because I always thought it was a great place where we can do great things as it relates to creativity. To me, it has failed in its purpose, and I'm very happy for the young lady to speak good of it, because I don't usually hear that. And I know when we haven't had such a place, we used to do good plays here on island, NIDACs, and something we used to seriously enjoy. I know we have a place, we don't see that kind of production happening, and people start to say the place have a concrete stage, and such places should be a wood stage. They find all kind of reason to criticize it, become a political something whereby it was built on the NRP, and so this and that and the other, and that really minimize our efforts and possibilities to a great extent. It's a place that can work and do well in terms of the development of arts and so forth. So let's use it up, And of course, I mean, these places are such place where so many things are said. We can do a lot of dramatic presentation reflecting the everyday things here on Nevis that would turn out to be quite funny and quite interesting sometimes, Even when Mr. Van Damme has passed, I said to somebody, well, maybe somebody should do a little sketch of Van Damme and possibly the difference between Van Damme and Mark Brantley. I mean, in a kind of humorous and welcoming way, not in any divisive way, because we go down that path too much amongst ourselves, I suppose. I think we have a good place, as the lady says, and there's so many things happening in and around in this little community that we can find so many topics that we can have short sketches about. But I don't think we really put time in, and I always say, well, the government pays a lot every month for culture. What is happening? What are we getting? I mean, the theater is there, some young entrepreneurs decide to keep movies in it. Keep movies, karate and all kind of things. And I say, what a failure. But everything we say is political and it's not taken serious. And I feel it's a good building and we can do a lot more with the building. Even, I mean, when it was built, it was something that we thought could have, produced that level of work that even tourists from the nearby hotel could have come and enjoy a good, play. But no, we tend to give up on things and accept a level of mediocrity, which hurts. And of course, the taxpayers still got to pay the 17 million back to the Labour government in power again, and so it is, and so it go. Well, let me give Mr. Stanley a chance to talk on that matter. Well, on the first segments of the show.
Well, let me say this, where I send congratulations to Mr. France for having done what he did and being so persistent to accomplish the mammoth objective which he has created, brought about a movement to the extent where its entertainment branch or arm of a culture, it brought in the region, not only the Caribbean, but also Africa, Britain, and to have such an impact in colonial Britain, white Britain, as a black person, it speaks volumes. So based on what he has brought to the fore and ultimately to fruition, it took an enormous amount of effort. He had it studied and figured out how to get it implemented. As a result, he was able to bring about not only an organization, but they were able to put it together to bring an entertainment aspect carnival to those people in Chapeltown, where my sisters live in England. Now, based on the effort he has acquired and been knighted by the Queen with an MBE, and it again, that speaks volumes, because if he had not been this persistent and dedicated, he would not have accomplished such a mammoth assignment, task, what he has given to himself. At the same time, you have to have people who are bent on helping your cause in order to get certain things done, and based on what has been accomplished, again, he needs to be congratulated. Now, he has not forgotten his humble beginnings in terms of where he was born. But this little island has produced so many greats, so many people of note, that he has to become and bring to the fore these different aspects. Again, he is an Nigerian by birth, but probably grew up in Britain, spends a lot of time in Britain, and as a result, he has accomplished a mammoth task with reference to bringing this carnival, and if, based on what he is saying, seemingly that was one of the first carnivals in Britain. And as Naya said, there are many areas in Britain that currently celebrate or have a carnival. I do not know, they don't have him at the same time, but I could remember very vividly, we had a delegation that left Nevis and went to one of the carnivals in Chapeltown.
Leeds. Yeah, Leeds Carnival.
There is another in Notting Hill, the Notting Hill Carnival.
That's London.
That's London. Okay. So, based on how he has, from a humble beginning, to have created something of this magnitude, it speaks volumes. Now, with the lady who was here, she considers herself as an activist, and she mentioned that she has been thrown out of different parts of the world, and sometimes her visa would be cancelled simply because she believes in championing the cause of the less fortunate, or let me use a term, the downtrodden, and therefore she has become passionate about it. Hence, the movement has taken on a global perspective which gives her a certain amount of firepower, a certain amount of credibility, and ultimately endurance. So we are happy to have her here to enlighten us, because again, some of us are bent on seeing certain things occur at that upper echelon or higher level, whereas we sometimes lose the real focus as to where we came from, where we are, where we want to go. And she spoke of the 1% of those who control, and as a result, the other 99% would be left hanging on to follow, and they're not treated in societies like ours the best of way. So, although she has a task, a mouth task that has been cut out for her, she is passionate about what she's doing to the extent that she would continue. And ultimately, somebody else would carry on when she's gone. But we need people like her to create balance. She talked about global warming, where the industrialized countries are creating global warming at the expense of the less fortunate, those who can't do a thing about it, but yet not being fully compensated for the damage being done with reference to global warming. The point is that the ocean is rising, and she mentioned about a disappearing country from which the inhabitants have to be currently evacuated. China, United States, Japan, and all industrialized countries should pay a price for the displacement of those people who are being evacuated from that country because of the ocean rise, or whatever effects coming from global warming can definitely be put at the doorstep of industrialized countries. They make the profits, and therefore those profits should not be expended on guns to kill people. I don't like wars, but it's a necessary evil, I guess. But those industrialized countries are making trillions of dollars at the expense of the rest of us. And a lot of those trillions are spent on weapons of war. Life is beautiful. Life is precious. Life is irreplaceable. Consequently, we should not subscribe to those countries who are making trillions of dollars and then plow back some of that money into the weapons of war to kill human beings. No.
Yes, Mr. Stanley, but I think there's a bigger circle. It's a big circle, because maybe it's those same country keep us here afloat with their money. So we start wondering now, like what's going on in the world today. Are we in any way dealing with the Russians? What extent should we be dealing with the Russians? We're a little island down here. Are we dealing with the Russians? And I'm not just talking about the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis. What we see happening in certain places in Africa, they have basically run the French out, and they are now welcoming the Russians. And so it seems to me like even though the world is supposed to be, or most of the world is supposed to be dealing with Russia in a kind of way because of its invasion of Ukraine, there are many countries that are willing to deal with them. What's the position of the Caribbean? I know they probably would gain some kind of interest in places like Venezuela, in places like, of course, India. But I haven't really heard much from the Caribbean leaders. I'm saying all this to say sometimes we try to undo things with one hand, but we're doing it with the other hand. The question is, how much can we, or what would be our level of survival without dealing in such ways? Even one of our economic might, which was, of course, the sale of passport. I mean, do we have a restriction on that as it relates to whether or not the recipient's going to be Russians? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we have been hearing sufficient from Caribbean leaders as it relates to that, or are we just keeping quiet about it and willing to function through the back door? I find we in the Caribbean find ourselves in very particular circumstance at times. One, because we're never thinking of self-sufficiency, and of course, can we be, given the way things are? Because we are consumers. Most of the Caribbean doesn't really produce as much, and it looks as if that in many ways we would find it very difficult to outdo the influx of goods coming from China. So where do we stand as a region on these very, very, very serious global matters? I sometimes would like to hear more from the leaders of the Caribbean on these matters. I know things keep changing a lot around us. Like the other day, Venezuela was a country the U.S. don't want to talk to. Now they are taking a different stand because of the energy crisis. So who do we really follow? I find these are fundamental questions, especially for us here in the Federation and other islands that deal in, the passport, the sales of passport, as we do, and our dependency on that. And so it's very important that we recognize the role we are playing. I'm not saying we shouldn't play it, but we recognize the role we are playing when it comes to global affairs, such as the war in Ukraine, and of course relationship with the Russians, whether they're individuals or even the Russian establishment. Mr. Stanley?
Well, we have to understand that the Caribbean and its leaders cannot really engage as they would like to, simply because we are just a tiny, minuscule, almost irrelevant when it comes to global affairs with reference to energy. Of course, they have just found oil in Guyana, which is close to Venezuela, and that energy policy is almost opposite to the what you call it, electric vehicles, green energy. Until they are able to maximize the green energy with reference to the automobile industry, we are still dependent on oil, and that plays a critical role in the economic, social, and even political aspect of the decision-making process. So where we are, we have to understand that each country has to look out at their own interest as to see how they must play a global role when it comes to participation. And like I said, we are just simply a tiny dot in the global scheme of things, and we have very little impact when it comes to decision-making process at that level concerning larger countries, the industrialized nations, the 7 really industrialized nations, and the other pact which Russia is part of, or the USSR, former USSR, was part of, and therefore China, Russia, India is not attempting to play a critical role in opposing or supporting Russia. It has taken almost a neutral stance in the war of Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine. But at the same time, we need to confront people, nations, who don't abide by international law, and therefore Russia, China, I understood now South Africa is part of supporting Russia, and I'm trying to say each nation has to look out for its own interest, but there is a moral aspect to the war in Ukraine. Even though Russia has done something for South Africa in the past, they have a moral obligation to understand that you do not invade an independent country, a sovereign country. So, based on the question you ask, where do the leaders of the Caribbean stand? What stance have the countries of the Caribbean and their leadership taken? Again, we don't play such a critical role or a non-critical role in the global scheme of things, and we are still emerging as a region, and we still have to go with hat in hand to these industrialized countries to get certain things from them, whether supplies, and you know the supply chain has been impacted quite adversely based on the war in between Russia and Ukraine, because Russia controlled at the time so many aspects of global commerce that President Biden had to take a stance, to the extent where he had to put out the effort, get the other countries on the bandwagon to confront Russia with reference to the war in Ukraine. He has been successful at bringing them together, but it is taking too much time for them to effectively do what they have to do to bring Russia to its knees, economic knees. And as a result, the war is still going on, people are dying, people are perishing. And the war efforts have been financed again by the trillions of dollars these industrialized countries are making. At the same time, those trillions of dollars could be put to much better use to help the less fortunate, the other 1%, 99% of the people whom the lady mentioned, the downtrodden, with reference to health, water, education, the whole 9 yards. Money has been misappropriated, misspent on things that are not conducive or important to the everyday aspects of life. So we must be able to have activists like the lady who was here to be able to tell the nations that they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing based on their stance in the world, their position in the world, global or regional as the case might be. So their feet must be held to the fire for them to spend less on military empowerment and more to help in those areas that I mentioned, education, health, as the case might be.
Okay, Mr. Stanley, yes, February 15th, there'll be an attempt to throw out the lawsuit of the election petition case. You're aware of that, right?
Quite so.
What do you think?
Well, based on what I heard, the very first sentence that they should put to the judge is to have it struck out. Meaning, Your Honor, or my Lord, who the presiding judge, there is no merit to this case and therefore strike it out. For the two petitioners that are attempting to waste the court's time, they have lost. And based on the fact that they have lost, they cannot make up the numbers, and therefore there is no case. The way I see it is that they want to stay in the race, and the race is over.
But do you think that the issue is going to go that far to be discussed in court, or it's
The
come
judge,
the 15th the suit is going to be thrown out?
the judge could accommodate them, but in my view, I've been to court. I don't like court, but the very first sentence that should be asked of the presiding judge is to throw out, strike it out. But he might be lenient enough to give them a hearing. Let's flesh this out and see where we go from here. But they have no case.
Well, that I don't know, because I don't know the facts really, and I don't think anyone have even the premier and
The facts have been in the public domain.
Detailed.
The facts have been in the public domain. They have not been entered into evidence because the public domain is not a court of law. And based on what I've heard,
Well, the reason why I asked if he's going to make it to court, because, you know, it's about filings and so forth.
Right,
If right
then they
procedures
file.
was followed, if right procedures was followed, then it goes on to hearing the essence of the case. That I don't know about what they're going to be asking for, because that wasn't mentioned in the suit, and so
Well,
I'm typing on that, because if standing is offered, then there's something to hear, and it's left to the judge, really.
well, what I'm saying to you is
And
that
that's why I asked you if he's going to pass the first hurdle.
it shouldn't pass the first hurdle, because they are fully aware that they've lost. I was told, or I heard it through the grapevine, that Mrs. Keynes, J.D. Keynes, lost by 27 votes, but she filed her petition to the court to hear the case after she has been urged time and time again by her supporters. And based on what I understood, Dr. Brantley has told his opponent, you're querying about 37 votes, take them. Take them. Take all. But yet, there's still a deficit. And the objective is to have the numbers. The night of the election, I could tell you, I didn't know exactly how many votes Dr. Brantley got. I was just listening to hear whose name is called first by the supervisor of election, and I didn't hear how many votes he got. But I was intently listening to hear how many votes his opponent got. And based on the fact that the supervisor of election called out Dr. Brantley's name first, told me that he was the victor. And the second name that called out was the vanquished. But when I heard of the petition that has been filed, I said, these people just want to stay in the game, and for them to tell their party, we are still fighting because there is something there. There is no there there. There is no there there. And consequently, in my view, the game is over.
But you know it's not over until it's over, right?
Well, Yogi Berra
Because-
said that it's never over until it's over.
Because something is going to be happening on the 15th.
Well,
And maybe it's over there.
they're wasting the court's time. They're wasting the court's time, in my view.
Well, there's a consequence for that.
Let me repeat. They're wasting the court's time. And there are so many cases to be heard. Why
Well, the court is
file
there for if you
something-
feel aggrieved, you take your matter to the court. If the court feel like, well, your
But you're
matter is
supposed to
worthy
be-
to be
you're
listened
supposed-
to, they listen to them. That ain't no guarantee that you're going to win.
you're supposed to be able to look at a case and make a determination as to its validity,
And of course,
what your chances are of winning. And if you did not hear the supervisor of election giving out the numbers, they're published, and therefore you go back, you look at the numbers, and you make a determination as to whether or not you won or lost. And if you are not wise enough to determine that you have lost, you are categorized as foolhardy. And at the same time, you're supposed to have learned lawyers around them to advise them.
Well,
And what I'm told is that they have not been given the advice or good advice, because you know there are times you practice law, but you're not taking on a case in which you are specialized, and therefore you are sailing in an ocean blindly. So in this regard, if they're sailing in an ocean blindly with no navigation equipment, the ship will run aground. So I would advise, as I sometimes do in a very limited way, to give certain amount of advice. But in this regard, they're supposed to know that they've lost. So why waste the court's time?
This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
And opinions expressed on the preceding program will solely be those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Nevis Broadcasting Company.